All right, so this will be good enough. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start this lesson here. And today we, today we're going to talk about one of the most important steps when it comes to building a chair like a Kitchissippi chair. The one that we're doing is pretty awesome. I really like them. And what I am finding is there is an important step that I missed on the first one that really kind of hindered me in some areas. It caused me to have to cut some extra pieces. And if I would have taken these steps to begin with, then I would have avoided having to cut some extra pieces, save myself a bunch of time. And what I'm referring to is knowing how to select good material for the project you're making. That could be hardwood for a big, say, cabinet that's all solid hardwood. It could be even just selecting good finished plywood for something like the cabinets the 20 levels are making. Same thing's going to apply to us with the Kitchissippi chair here. This Kitchissippi chair is great, but if we select some material that isn't of high quality, it's going to give us an issue. And I'm going to kind of talk to you guys about what to look for when selecting material. There are some things we need to keep an eye out for. It doesn't mean the material is garbage, but it just means that we're going to have to use it for other pieces. Now, with this stuff here, I'm just going to close the door and we'll get this noise stopped here. All right, so selecting good, clean material. I'm going to say clean. I mean it's not twisted. There are no big knots in it. There's no big checks or splits or cracks. We want to make sure it's good looking wood. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's got to be good looking. We want, firstly, this chair is made of wood, so we want wood that looks half decent for a finished product. Secondly, in class, we've got a fair amount of wood here, but we don't have enough wood to just pick up a board, see a twist in it and go, oh, this is garbage, and toss it, right? We need to find a way to use it. My goal here is to maximize the usage of all the pieces. In junior high, you guys maybe have taken CTF, and in CTF, there is a portion of the outcomes called environmental stewardship. And that just means doing our best to conserve the materials we have and in turn be a little nicer to the environment. If I've got this wood and it's not very good and I pitch it off the side and throw it away, that's kind of wasteful. So I'm going to find a way to use that material a little better, maybe on a different project, but it just keeps things a little nicer. And if we're buying wood, we're already spending that money on the board. A board is $5 for a 4-inch board by 8 feet. You don't want to throw that $5 bill away. You're not just gonna, throw it on the ground and walk away from it. So that's pretty much what you're doing with the board, though. If you just toss off the side and it's no good, you're wasting that money you've invested. So we find other ways of working with it. What I got behind me, you guys can't see it yet, is a bunch of different pieces of wood, and we're going to go over the wood that's here. I'm going to show you guys some stacked up wood in the storage room. We're going to talk about why we stack it that way, and just a few other things to look out for when selecting wood, because selecting good quality material is going to save you a bunch of time and effort and possible frustration when it comes to working on the project. So let's start this here, and what I'm going to do is tip this camera down, and I'm going to show you guys a board that is okay, but not great. So we're going to slide over here. All right, so got this stack of wood here. It's pretty good, pretty straight, pretty clean. But what I want to show you is this board here. So it may be hard to tell, but even seeing how it's sitting here, this part here is not level. And this part back here is twisted the opposite way. So this board has a big twist in it. And when I hold it like that, pretty much straight at the camera, you can see there's a big twist in the board. If we were trying to work with this board and make a nice long straight piece, this would be quite difficult. This would not be a board I would want to have try and cut a nice straight piece of wood out of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this board and set it aside and use it for smaller, shorter pieces. Maybe something like the seat slats for our chair or one of the backrest pieces. But right now, I wouldn't use this one for a leg or an armrest because it's just got too much of a twist in it. So firstly, looking at the wood and figuring out what's good and what isn't is the big thing. You know, that front edge is flat. This one here, it's got a big twist in it. Not a good thing. There's also some knots throughout this board. You kind of see some knots as we get through here. And those knots can be an issue also. But one thing when working with this board, we get these from, say, Lowe's or Rona. And you guys can see here, we have our stickers on the end. There's a bit of wax over it to seal that in. But also we got these stickers here with staples. If I slide this up, you guys can see that manufacturer sticker there. What they do is that's so they can scan each board. This is the barcode. We need to make sure that's off there before working with material. So when working with material, I always check it for any foreign bodies. Foreign bodies, foreign material just means things that are on the wood that should not be there and that you don't want to put through your tools. So there's a big staple here. Gonna get rid of that staple, gonna pull the sticker off. Staples out there, I've got that. It's not big, but you don't want that running through your saws. We had an issue with the planer just the other day. I may have mentioned that to you guys, where we had person run a screw through the planer and it caused a lot of damage to the knives in there. So we want to make sure there's no screws, no nails. If it's lumber you've reclaimed or salvaged, we don't want any rocks or pebbles, any of that stuff in there. It's all just going to destroy your saw blades. Wood is soft, steel is hard, and a lot of this stuff, these saw blades or the cutting knives in the jointer and the planer aren't designed to cut hard things. So they'll chip the blades, they'll be damaged, and it's going to take a lot of work to get those tools fixed up. So Mr. Kamali and myself, we worked on the planer yesterday. Mr. Kamali did the most of it, and it took about 3 hours to get all the knives out, switch them over, get them working again the way we want, so we get a nice flat cut on our boards. So definitely some time invested. So with this material, we definitely want to have, you know, good, clean, straight stuff. If we're looking at it on end here, just like this piece, we can see that it is just slightly concave here. So we got that concave, and we talked about concave and convex in class. Just because it has that, that is not the end of the world, right? So we talked about using the breakout procedure to remedy the sides of the board that are not flat. Thing is, if we have a board with a severe concave or severe convex, we need to maybe select a different board, because we've got to cut these boards, and every time we run it through the planer, we take a little bit of thickness off. We want this board at the end of it to be thick enough to work with. If it's any thinner than 5/8 of an inch, it's not going to work for this project. It's just not going to be strong enough for a leg or an armrest. You got to think, average human, probably about 175 pounds. I know some of us are smaller. I'm on the small side, but we also have some big examples of people, right? So this chair needs to be strong enough to support a fair amount of weight. So selecting good material to start with is going to allow you your maximum thickness of material. If we have a piece that's all flat or not flat, and we plane and we plane and we plane and we joint and we run it through the table saw, square it up, we may end up with something that looks more like this. So this piece here is about half an inch thick, maybe a little less than that. And this is something that students were working on to try and create a leg piece out of. Now, they had some pretty bad concavity in the board, and they ran across the jointer again and again and again, finally got that out, ran it through the planer, board was flat, and they looked at it and they go, oh, well, that sucks because that's only half an inch. So looking at this here, yeah, the board is pretty much exactly half an inch. So definitely not what we want for our material. So picking material that is minimally concave is going to be what works well for us. Also, if we're working with hardwoods, because this pine and fir is what we're working with, that's softwood. You can tell it's just not very dense, it's light. We have other materials, some bigger boards. And when we buy hardwood, we buy very rough raw boards. They don't come finished kind of like the 1x4s or the 1x6s we get from Lowe's or Rona. We buy a fairly rough board and we cut all the final dimensions on it. And doing that is going to allow us to maximize the material. If we want to get as thick as possible, we're going to cut it as little as possible to get it square, and that should provide us with some nice wood. When we get stuff from hardwood stores, especially lumber stores, it's going to look more like this. See the stuff with the blue ends on it? See if I can get that there. There we go. That is all rough and raw. And I'll show you some examples of how it comes. These boards are definitely not square, and I'll show you what we can see on them. So I've got this board here. It's nice. It's almost an inch thick, pretty good looking material, a little rough on edges, but they cut this directly out of the tree wherever they can cut it from, usually from the edge, working in. So sometimes you get things like that. And what this is a whole bunch of bark from the outside edge of the tree on this. So we don't want this on our material when we're working with it. So we've got two options. What we can do here is we can cut this board right about here and save this for something else, or we can run it through the table saw. Once we joint the edge and the face, okay, those flat surfaces, we could joint that edge or table saw the edge right here to cut that off. Thing is, fairly long board. You're going to cut off a lot of material and waste a lot of material if you do that there. So what I would do is most likely cut this edge off right where it becomes good solid wood, and then break out the rest of the board. A couple things we have to pay attention to. The hardwood we get, when it comes to us, it can have some pretty gross checks and cracks. We can see that there. That's a big nasty piece. We don't want that ending up in our hands. We don't want to slide these boards to our hand. We want to handle these with caution and care. We don't need gloves when we're handling just a few pieces of wood. We just need to use caution. So things like this can give us slivers. We do often see slivers in the classroom, but with a little more care, we can avoid that. If people really need gloves, we can get people gloves. It's not a big deal, but it's just not something we use all the time in here because gloves aren't safe around rotating equipment. So that could be the drill press, that could be the lathe, that could be the shapers and sanders, oscillating spindle sander, jointer, there's a bunch of things that's just bad news when it comes to gloves. They can grab that material, pull it in, and then we have to make a call and possibly a trip to heat or law heat. And that's not something I want for anybody in here. So talking about these boards, you know, we just have to be aware that they do come pretty rough. We do get some rough edges on them, but we can reclaim a really nice piece of wood out of this piece here by using the breakout process we talked about. Let's talk about storage a little bit. Storage of this wood. We always store it laying flat, and we support it on boards, and there's some reasons for that. I'm going to take you guys over to the storage room, and I'm going to show you a stack of wood I have stored in there, and we're going to talk about why I've stored it in there that way. So we're going to take this. You guys are coming for a ride with me. All right. Let's see if this works. What can we see? We can see enough of it. That's good. All right. So behind me, you guys can see that stack of lumber right there. And in fact, you guys may have even helped me bring it in from my truck that one day. That's going to be for all the Kitchissippi chairs. But you notice how we got it stacked up real nice on the floor there, and there's that little gap underneath it? So there are some reasons we do stuff like that. Firstly, the gap on the bottom is nice and helpful. If you're trying to pick up a stack of boards, you can get your fingers underneath it. You're not trying to pull up that last board, get your fingers under it, and you're kind of fighting with it. But that isn't the main purpose of why I do it. So I've got multiple boards underneath there, keeping all that lumber off the ground. And what that does is it helps air circulate around this lumber. So when this lumber is manufactured, it's kiln dried. So they put this big kiln, they dry it, they get all the moisture and steam out of it, and basically hope it stays straight. And most of the time it does, so that's cool. That just gives us a nice dry piece of wood to work with. When it goes in the truck, they'll load it in the trucks, they'll drive it across the country or wherever, they'll move it to a Lowe's or a Rona. It could drive, say, from middle of BC to here, or even the West Coast, let's say Vancouver. So it comes from Vancouver. Vancouver's got lots of humidity. It's a wet type of air, much higher humidity than us. They're obviously much closer to the ocean, and we're drier. So as this wood travels to us, it's going to pick up moisture again. So there's a little bit more moisture content in the wood than we want to work with. So what we do is I bring this wood in, I stack it up like this so air can get around it, and it slowly dries out again. It acclimates to our climate. We're a more dry climate. We're probably 30–40% humidity. So the wood's going to drop back down to that. And there's a couple things we can do to help slow that. Because when we dry that wood from moist to dry real quick, it's going to twist and warp and give us pretty bad looking boards. So what we do here is we stack it all up nice in one big pile, and that keeps the moisture in for the most part, but it slowly releases. Instead of having every board exposed to all the air on all sides, that would dry it out quite quick. But when we stack it up like this, it's going to slowly let that moisture come out, and the board's going to kind of normalize to our climate, hopefully without too much twisting and warping. So a lot of the times you'll find if you buy 2 or 3 boards from Lowe's or Rona, they'll look really good. You take them home and they dry up, and then all of a sudden they're twisted and all sorts of bad things, and that's not a good thing. So doing it like this is going to help that wood dry a little slower, acclimate better. It's going to keep it flat. Laying it like this, we can also use the weight of all those pieces behind me to push down on all of them, and it keeps the boards a little more flat, especially when they're drying. So this is the best way I've found to store them. We store hardwoods like that, softwoods, things like plywood sheets. We can store standing up, but it is probably best to store stand or laying down. It's going to keep all those boards flat. When a board stands up forever, eventually it's going to start to lean, and it'll end up with a curve in it, and that curve isn't going to be helpful for us if we're trying to use these products in a on a project that requires a lot of long, straight, flat wood. But yeah, so that's a little bit about storage of wood. There may be a question about that on the quiz coming up, hint, hint. So yeah, it's a good thing to pay attention to. We're going to go back over to some of the hardwoods that I have, and we are going to talk about some of the defects we see in the hardwood when we get it, and what to look out for when selecting wood for your projects. So we're going to do that now. All right, so I've got this first piece of wood we were talking about. It had bark on it. So we want to make sure that's off there, right? So we're going to cut that board somewhere about here. The miter saw, so we know how to use that one now. But a couple other things we want to pay attention to is when they cut these boards, they don't cut every board square. So if you look, the ends are actually rounded over because right here was where the bark was on the outside of the tree that got taken off. So this is actually the outside edge of the tree. We don't want to work with that because that is a big piece that is not full thickness. And if we need full thickness on this, we have to get rid of things like this. So we're going to cut this board off here and here. It may seem like a bit of a waste, but in this process, when we're doing this, there is some waste wood created. We can use it for smaller projects, or we can use it for a fire pit. So it's nice to have that option. Got a question from Brian, and Brian asks if we're going to be in Zoom the whole class. Not the whole class. I intend to just go through this lesson fairly quick, and then there's a 5-question quiz for you that has been released on your D2L. And once you guys complete that, you guys are done with my class. But I need to get through the speaking portion so I can cover all the topics in the, what do you call it, in the, sorry, there's just another email that came in. Yeah, so I got to cover all the topics that are in the quiz with this little lesson here, and then you guys complete the quiz, and we will go from there. But yeah, so we got to watch out for these bad ends like that one, you know, the big busted edges on here, something like this. There's a pretty gross big sliver you don't want in your hand there, so I like to take those off sometimes. And when I talk about the boards, man, we're just gonna use caution when handling rough wood. So right here, we can kind of see another example of the outside edge of the tree, right here and right here where the bark was. We would need to either trim that out or cut it off. But on the opposite end of the board, you guys can see it, but right there in the blue is a nice big crack. I call that a check. It's a split that runs down the length of the board. Now, it doesn't run the length, but you guys can see here, it runs up quite a ways. So probably about 12 inches. If I needed an intact board for something, say it was a nice tabletop, I wouldn't want this crack on that tabletop, right? It's just not aesthetically pleasing. It doesn't look as nice as it could. So we want to get that out of there. And with pieces like this, with such a big crack, unfortunately, we got to cut it off and waste that 1 foot of wood on the end. Now, it might not be wasted. We might find another use for it, but sometimes it just has to go in the fire pit. And, you know, instead of wasting it, we can at least roast some marshmallows with it. So we're going to get some use out of it instead of just throwing it away entirely. Here's another board. When we get these, they're not always square. So we have to create that square from the start, right? We got to joint a face, then we got to joint an edge, and then we got to square up one edge, cut it, square up the other edge. Boards like this, right here, they aren't even when I get them. So here, we do this. You can see we are, that's hard to read, but not very wide. Somewhere around 8 inches, and on the other end, I am wider than that. I'm probably 1.5 inches wider on this end. So knowing that breakout procedure we talked about, very important. So that's how we can take nice raw lumber like this and turn it into something cool and useful in this class. Another thing, some of this wood doesn't have it, but some does. And I've got a piece here behind me I'm going to show you guys. This was a seat flat that was made for the Kitchissippi chairs. And it seemed really good and strong. But if you notice, there is a knot right here. So with just a little bit of pressure, that broke in half. So if we are creating something that needs structural strength, we need to be careful of knots being in the middle of our work. Some big knots can be loose and they'll wobble inside of the wood. And when running them through a jointer or a planer, like over here, those can actually get ejected out of the wood. They can go flying across the room. They can get lodged in the machine. There's a bunch of things that can happen. So I don't really like to work with a lot of wood with big knots in it. If for some reason that knot ends up in the middle of, say, a seat slat, and some person decides to sit there and it breaks, firstly, they're going to damage your chair. Secondly, they could actually maybe even fall through that chair, which isn't a good thing. We don't want to create that damage. And it's just not a good practice to use knots in the middle of your wood. If you're using something simple, like a piece of wood to create, say, a tea light holder, we just did that in class, and it's got some knots in it, those can be more decoration. You can use those knots for the decoration, kind of have some character in your wood, and I think it looks really good when used that way. But if we're using the wood for strength, knots are a bad thing. You want straight grain when it comes to that. That is pretty much my little lesson for today, guys. Looks like we're at half an hour, which is a couple more minutes than I wanted, but it's not the full 72, so you guys are doing good. I do have a quiz for you for today. I've gone over everything in it, made sure of it, and that quiz is going to be in your solid stock construction unit. So it's no longer going to be in your construction 1010 construction tools materials. It's going to be, yes, in the solid stock construction unit. It's going to be under resources and then content. You'll see it there. And the big heading is going to be online classes. You click that one. There'll be another folder under that one. It says December 1st class. And click that, and then there's going to be a quiz. It's 5 questions, a few multiple choice, and a couple true false. There is no reason anybody should get less than 100%. I've given you all the answers. I make these quite easy. I'm not trying to stump any of you. This is just to make sure that you guys are actually present and paying attention during class, and that we have everybody on board. I need to get an email out to another student. Apparently I missed him with the link, but yeah, so that is going to be it for today's class, folks. Once again, if you haven't dropped your name in the chat, please do. It looks like everyone is using their actual names, which is great. I had some students yesterday who weren't, and I had to figure out who they were, and that was a little more difficult. So if you did receive a call yesterday, a call home, and you were partaking in the video, I am sorry about that. There was, a few names that I was having trouble deciphering, and the students didn't drop their actual names in the chat. So once again, thank you for attending. I appreciate it. I hope you guys are warm, dry, healthy, happy, COVID-free, and I just hope we can get back to this soon. This is way different than I like. I like working in class, working with students, showing them cool things. But hopefully I can have some chairs ready for you to assemble when we get back. All right, thanks guys. Jump on that quiz quick, 5 questions, get that done. And have a great day. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Same time, same place. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.